Here we go. It says we're live, but I don't see anything yet.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. There we go. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It is so nice to see your smiling face, my friend. This ought to be a fun hour together. And let's just kick it off. First, I hope your holidays were great. Were they good? You got to
They were
spend some time with family and loved ones?
Yes, absolutely. How about yours?
Oh, terrific. Absolutely lovely, except for my son got the flu over
Oh,
Christmas, which made us have a very small Christmas. We made up for it on New Year's. All good. But let's just jump right in. For those that don't know you, would you kindly give a little bit of background, who you are, and what makes you uniquely qualified to have this conversation today?
yeah, sure. So, hi everybody. My name is Raina Gandhi. I have my own consultancy around helping women specifically in the workplace progress when they get stuck. So, whether it's structural barriers that are internal to themselves or things like getting passed up for promotion that may be more on the external side of things, how to navigate some of that, how to negotiate for themselves, how to advocate for themselves. I have started my career in investment banking, went and did some consulting, got my MBA, did microfinance, went back into banking, and then I took 11 years off to raise my girls. And then when I went back, I essentially started in higher education and I started in career services. So for many, many years, then I worked with undergraduates, graduates, alumni on helping them progress in their careers. So do everything from job search strategy or even career assessments, trying to figure out what it is that they want to do, all the way through negotiating the job offers. So, and everything in between. So I'm really excited. My favorite things to talk about are resumes and interviews and negotiating. So I'm very, very excited to talk about this today.
Well, I couldn't be happier to have this conversation with you live. And thanks to everyone who's joined. If you see me looking down, I'm looking at your comments. If you have questions, I'm not checking texts. I'm merely just looking for what y'all are saying. So if you have any questions, please, by all means, chuck them in the chat. And I believe Jennifer Sethry is watching. She will also, I'm sure, answer questions on the fly as she's watching. So welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Lyndsay Dowd. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Intry. We focus on helping job seekers in a number of different ways. We have a career accelerator coming up in January this month, January 16th and 17th. We also work with job placement agencies. We work with career coaches and resume writers, and we work with HR leaders on their outplacement alternatives. So today we're focusing on interviewing, everything you need to be thinking about for an interview. And let's just start with the basics of, if you have to interview, it is likely you were laid off or you lost your job or you were fired. So one of those things was likely fairly traumatic. And it's taking you some guts and some ability to dust yourself off and get into this whole job seeking process. And if you're like me, I went 25 years without having to submit a resume or interview. I basically got my jobs through my network and through referrals and through introductions. So you might be rusty. So we wanted to really arm you with what you need to be thinking about. So Raina, let's level set on the emotional piece of it first, because I recognize how hard this is. And I know from my own experience, it can be pretty gut wrenching. Why don't we start there and just talk about some of the stuff you talk about with your clients and advice for our audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So let's start with where you are today, right? If you've just been laid off, if you've just been riffed, I've been riffed. Most of the people that I know have been riffed or laid off something at some
Yeah.
point in their lives. The difference there is that you may not necessarily have had a chance to line something else up, right? So this is a chance to just take a deep breath and recognize that it's really hard and sit with those emotions. I would say, a lot of times I work with folks who are really want to move past that and jump right into the job search strategy, but
Right.
that's really just, they're not there, right? And this is very tricky because you only have one chance to make a first impression. So whether you're putting your resume together or whether you're interviewing, whatever it is that you're doing, you want to have some kind of strategy in place. So first, whatever self-care that you need to do, I think that's really important. I threw myself a pity party for about 24 hours, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. But it was a pretty big pity party in my head, you know. But and then I was done.
Everyone was invited.
You did not want to be invited to that party in my head. Not a good
Yeah.
one, right? But it happens, and it happens to
Okay.
all of us, to the most confident, and it doesn't matter because you start questioning, why me? What did I do? What could I have done differently? And that's not necessarily the case. There are so many factors involved
Well,
that,
and let's just comment on that for a second, because I don't want people to think, and I thought this when I was fired from my job, I thought no one would ever want to work with me again. I thought I was the only executive on earth to ever be fired. I thought I was persona non grata. And, 2 books later, a podcast later, lots and lots of clients and success stories. I'm okay. You are not defined by your circumstance. And whether you're riffed, you get fired, you get laid off, that is not a dig on who you are or your accomplishments. And no one can take away your accomplishments. So continue. I just had to add that because I want people to be thinking about that.
no, that's absolutely true. So when you're ready, and you may not have the luxury of waiting months, 6 months, 8 months to figure out what you want to do. So start first, I think, with your networking on, and the best place to do that always has been is LinkedIn, of course. Trying to get, if there are certain industries or functions that you're interested in, or if you're not really sure, reach out to somebody, reach out to a coach or someone who can help you define that a little bit better.
Right.
So once you've done that and you've networked on LinkedIn, so if Lyndsay, let's say that I'm looking for a job and I see that you are very close to, or you have in your connections someone from the company that I'm interested in working at, I might send you a little message or an email or whatever, DM, and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I'm thinking about moving to this industry, and I'd love it if you would give me a warm connection, if you would provide me with a warm connection with so and so in such and such field. Like, I would explain to you why, and most likely you would say, yeah, of course, and then you would make the connection. That's going to make it a lot easier to network than in other ways. And LinkedIn, everyone uses it as such a powerful tool, and it is, but really when you're in the job search phase, this is a really good place to be.
Well, and let's talk about that for a second. So last week, Melissa Cohen and I did a live, and it was all focused on LinkedIn and how important that tool is. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. There was lots of tips and tricks. It was shared a ton of times. People are telling us it was super helpful. So use that as a primer. But there are a ton of LinkedIn experts out there who are doing good things, who have optimized their profiles. And that is a piece of what we offer in the Career Accelerator. But do not underestimate how critical nurturing your network is. And one of the tips that I love to give is everybody needs recommendations, and recommendations are testimonials for who you are. So the best way to get recommendations is to give them. So especially if you are feeling down and if you are feeling really uninspired and empty and sad, go write a beautiful recommendation to someone else that will bring a tear to their eye. And when you do that, and it's unsolicited, it could be a job, it could be a boss, it could be a partner, it could be a colleague. First of all, they're going to be so delighted. But 9 times out of 10, they're going to write you one in return. And those are going to make you feel great, but they also look really good on your profile. And if you haven't had a recommendation in over a year, you are due. Time for some homework. Go write some recommendations, write 3 this week. And I tell people do that 3 every week for at least a few months just to get those hopping. You want a whole bunch of testimonials about you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
important. Yeah.
The other thing that I was going to say is you want to also make sure you said it, and I want to emphasize it. Really, it's to optimize your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
So the first place they're going to go if you reach out to anyone, whether it's a hiring manager, the CEO, it doesn't matter. Someone who would be on your potential team, it doesn't matter. I would highly recommend making sure that your LinkedIn profile is optimal. And I believe we're going over that in the Career Accelerator as well.
Oh yeah. No, we spend a lot of time on that, and we actually spend a lot of time on the networking aspect and what's your strategy around networking. But you cannot underestimate how important your network is. And if you think you're going to get a job through Easy Apply, don't do that. I'm telling you right now. Take that off of your list. That is not a thing you want to do. You want to have your resume be solid, but you want to really have someone that hand your resume to someone else, because that is really the best way you're going to get a job that's a good match for you. All right, so we've dealt with kind of the social and the emotional and mental piece of do some self-care, take good care of yourself, and be kind to yourself. Raina, give some advice on how much is reasonable to spend in a regular day of job seeking or those kinds of things? Because I think most people think that this is my full-time job now. For 8 hours today, I'm going to pound the virtual pavement and get in there and look for a job. Is that realistic?
So I think it's play it smart, right? So there are a couple things that you want to do. You want to make sure that you have an ATS friendly resume. That's really important, because if you don't, you could spend 12 hours a day on this and it's not going to get you very far. So if you have 1 or 2 or 3 ATS friendly resumes, depending on what kind of roles you're looking for, you're better off with that. Like you said, the Easy Apply button, it looks really easy, but really you want to have a cover letter. You want to be able to explain why you're interested in this job.
Yeah.
And most likely you're not going to be applying for CMO jobs as well as CHRO jobs, or those are very different fields. So if you've got your marketing resume, use that, right? If you want to do something in product, something a little bit similar, a little peripheral, that's fine. Have another resume ready for that too. But that's going to be key. And the internal referral, like you said, that's going to be key. So you have to be really smart. In fact, if it were me, I would, and it has been me, I would spend more time on the networking and getting to know people and asking the right questions so that you get those interviews faster. Knowing someone in the company is the fastest way to get.
And most companies pay out referrals. Like if you bring someone in and they hire them, you get a referral. So it's in a lot of people's best interest to hire you. If you've been great and you've got a great story to tell, most people aren't unhappy to do that. So nurturing that network really does pay off in those situations. So you talked a little bit about having different versions of resumes. And one of the things we spend a lot of time at Intry on is taking the job description, using the job description with our resume technology to tailor your resume to that job description. And I'll tell a little story. I applied for a job that I know I was deeply overqualified for. Like, no problem. This was easy for me. And on LinkedIn, it said, you're a 43% match. I'm like, oh, the hell I am. I'm way better than that. And what it was I wasn't using the keywords in my skills that they were using in the job description. So when I went back and I updated my skills with those keywords, I was something like an 89% match. And I'm like, well, that's more like it. But it was really interesting just to see how my profile is written and the algorithms that they're using to see, does it match up? So you definitely want to check your skills, but you also want to make sure that you're leveraging those keywords in the job descriptions. That's a really important piece. Okay, so we've got our resume together. We are doing some self-care. We are not spending 8 hours a day doing job seeking stuff. And I want to just clarify that piece. There's an immense amount of pressure on you to get another job, whether it's self-imposed or from your family or your friends. Everybody feels that pressure. But spending 8 hours a day is not only unrealistic, it's not healthy. You need a break. You need to take a walk. You need to go to the gym. You need to have lunch with someone. You need human interaction. It's so, so important to surround yourself with people who want to see you win and who want to lift you up. But that is some punishing work to spend an entire day doing that. So give yourself, 3-hour chunks or 2.5-hour chunks and then go back, but put some time in between it. Okay,
definitely
go. Yeah.
Balance, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely balanced, because if you're only going to spend 1 or 2 hours a day, that's not going to get you very far either. You want to be smart, but you have to put the work in. And you'll see as you prepare for interviews, let's say, you don't have to keep preparing for each interview completely separately. There will be general questions that you'll be able to answer with the same kind of stories outside of
100%.
why this company, why this specific role, things like that, right? So a lot of it is repetitive or redundant. You can use it time and again, but a lot of it is not. So that the cover letter, you have to do it. It's, if they're asking for it, you got to do it, because they won't really consider you. And if you get through to the hiring manager, which means that your resume was ATS friendly, then they'll read your cover letter. So first you got to get the resume, then you got to get the cover letter, and then you got to start planning for the interviews.
Yes. So, okay, let's say you've got the interview, it's been secured. So you made it past the ATS gate and you are ready to rock. And the first thing that I know that we focus on is, how do you tell your story? What's your unique value prop? So, Raina, what are some of the tips that you teach your clients?
Yeah. So first, if you're going into the office for this interview, some of the things that I always recommend are, be very friendly with the person who greets you, who has
Yes.
reception, all of that. All of those things really matter. Of course, I highly recommend, I tell my clients, don't sit and get on your phone. Don't do either of those two things, because when the person comes in and is ready to shake your hand, you're already standing and you're ready to shake the hand. So you're at equal level right there. If you're sitting and you're on your phone, you're like fumbling, and there's no time for that. This is your
Good
first
tip.
Want to, look at the artwork on the wall, do something else, look out the window. It doesn't
Take
matter.
some deep breaths.
Yeah,
Yep.
take deep breaths, do a power position if you're the only person in the room.
Yep.
Whatever you need to do to get yourself ready. And then, of course, sometimes it's the first few seconds that they'll automatically know whether or not they're going to be excited about this interview or they're just going to pass the time. So you want to make a little bit of small talk. You'll probably have done you surely will have done some research on LinkedIn on whoever you're interviewing with. So if there's something that you have in common, this is a great time to bring that up and say, hey, I noticed when I was doing my research that you're really interested in X or Y, or that you studied this language.
Or went to this school, or
Yeah, right. So find a common ground and talk about that. And then, when they start the interview, the first question they're typically going to ask is, tell me about yourself, or why do you specifically want this, or walk me through your resume, something along those lines, right? So the first tip is, it shouldn't be more than 2 minutes long. Okay. The second tip is, don't start with, well, I was born. That's not what they're interested in, right?
Nope.
It's really important. And honestly, I say this and I sound like I'm laughing, but people who haven't interviewed in 20 years, 15 years, are having to interview now at the C-suite level, at the director level. These things matter.
They totally do.
And saying, I got married in the first 3 sentences, that's not what's relevant here.
No.
You want to stick to, here's my professional background. So you start with, here's a little bit of my professional background. Then you end with, and the person who's interviewing you should know in general why you're sitting in front of them. What about the industry? What about the function? What about the company? Generally, you don't have to go into all that detail, because you're going to want to go into more detail later. But
that's right.
You want to give a general idea as to why you're sitting in front of them, why you're really passionate about this role, without saying, the reasons I want to be in this position are. It should just flow. And that's something that you can prepare for. So just taking a step back, so much of this is preparation. And, they say in a negotiation, 80% is preparation, 20% is execution. I would say it's a little bit more on the execution piece in the interview because you really have to present
Right.
yourself well. But the preparation piece, knowing the company really well, doing the research, and not just like a general Google research, which you should do, but really going deep. Was there an acquisition recently? Was there something in the news recently? Was there a press
Mhm.
release? What do their financials look like? All of those things are things, even if you're going for a marketing job, you need to know those things. So just
So let me just interrupt because our friend Claire Davis did a post today and I loved it. And she talked about if you're going to an interview, buy the coffee, meaning bring them a coffee. Now that's risky because not everybody drinks coffee, but whatever, it's a gesture anyway. Say, I brought you a coffee, bring all the accoutrement. And the other thing she said, which I loved, she talked about a guy who had interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people for a job, and one stood out. And what that person did was to say, before I tell you anything about me, what are you trying to solve? What's the pain that this position is going to fix? And once I understand that, I will happily demonstrate where I can be a fit. And I thought that was so smart because you're hearing in their words exactly why they need you. And then you can answer that question. And it sets you up so, so well for the rest of the interview. But to your point of telling your story in a concise way, that is a life skill. That is not just a skill you're going to master for a job interview. That is a skill you're going to master for anyone you meet. And it's so important to humanize yourself. You will get into the quantifiables. You will talk about all of your accomplishments and all of the stuff that you've done. But if you don't have a super interesting story to start, you're not going to get that far. So one of our favorite examples, we had a bunch of great people in our cohorts. One of my friends, his name's Peter, he was in our cohort, and um, he was I knew him from IBM. We worked together in tech, and he got specifically focused on med tech, and that's where he really wants to play. And we said, well, what brought you there? And he said, well, my wife has a heart condition, and my daughter was born with the same genetic heart condition, and she's never without her defibrillator. She can't go anywhere without it because she could have a heart attack at any time. And it was so important to me that I be a part of good tech that is helping people like my own family. Well, I'm sorry. If you start any conversation with that, all of a sudden you have demonstrated why you have passion. And that kind of drive is impressive to people. It shows the humanity behind your choice. Now, can't always say that about accounting. You can't always say that about a lot of jobs. But if you can align it to a human story, it's going to make you memorable and it's going to make you more interesting. So those stories, Raina's got it right, should be about 2 minutes, but you want to leave them wanting more. And then when you get to dig it, they'll be like, wait, go back, tell me more. I need to understand this better. They're interested. You've got them on the edge of your seat. And that's a good thing. So, okay, so we did a good job on our story. We're getting through. What are some of the questions that people are asking today in interviews that people should be ready to answer?
Yeah. So I think some of the traditional ones around, tell me about a time that you had to step up in a leadership role, or time that you had to manage conflict, right? These kinds of questions will come up in some form or another, because what they want to see is, they feel that your past behavior is going to be demonstrated in your future behavior. So however you've handled something in the past,
Yes.
you're going to be doing that in the future, right? So some of the things, this is where people fall short, and they say, we did this and we did that and we did this, and we're not talking about the team. They're asking about what your specific value add is. And I see this a lot where they want to show that they're a team player, but this is the time to say, you can
I
still,
led my team to, yeah. Yeah.
yes, and talk about what your specific value was in that,
Mhm.
right? I think that's really important. There are going to be questions around AI now. However that industry is impacted by AI, they're going to be asking questions about
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
So you want to be prepared. You want to do that research as well. How has AI impacted that specific role or that specific field or that specific industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are going to be questions around that. And then depending on if you're looking to take on a senior level marketing role, let's say, and you're trying to enter into they're thinking about entering into a new market. Remember, this is a conversation. So they're going to be asking you questions, but hopefully it's not just they ask you a question and you answer it and then they move on to the next question. You want this to be
conversational. Yes.
So, take a deep breath. And if you don't know the answer to something that they're asking, then, that's a great question. That's a great question, Lyndsay. Let me think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And take a second to think about it. That's not going to hurt you. That's not going to ding you on anything. We're all human, and maybe you have 3 examples that you want to share, and you can even say that. Sometimes I've just said, that's such a great question. There are a couple of examples that I can give, but the one that I think really emphasizes my learning in X was, and then you set that up. And the way you set that up is through the STAR method. So you very briefly describe what the situation was. Then you say what the task was. So situation, task, action, result, right? So the situation, 1 sentence, 2 tops. Then the task, what did you specifically do? What were you asked to do? What was it that was presented to you that you should have, you needed to get done? And then the actual actions that you took. And then the result, what happened as a result of that. So oftentimes when people start with the we, it starts with the situation, we, and then the task was, we were tasked to do this, and then we did this, and then this was our result. Our team, you could say our team was tasked to do, or the situation, set it up. But from task, action, and result, you really want to be talking about your value proposition.
Your role. Yep.
So your role. Yeah. So that's going to be really important. And hopefully that will then engage in a bigger conversation, and they'll ask further questions about that, right? So you want to try and make sure that you're not ending each question with just like a flat answer, and then they feel like they have to ask
100%. Yeah. And I think another tip too that I would love to share is if you are going in for a job interview, take that job description, plug it into your AI, your favorite AI tool, and say, write me some questions that this interviewer might ask me based on this job description. And that's going to give you a really great opportunity to prep yourself. And what I would do, record yourself. In our Career Compass tool that we built with Intry, we have a mock interviewing feature that you can record it and it will grade you based on what you said, which is fantastic. But if you don't have that, record yourself and watch it back. And guys, if you're not used to being on camera, just give yourself some grace. It's not a big deal. No one else is seeing it. It's just for you. Just get over the cringe part and just start listening and then trying to refine it. You want to be economical with your words. You want to avoid words like, be clear, be thoughtful, be articulate, and take your time. It's okay to put emphasis on words. It's okay to breathe. But if you can be grounded and your energy is calm, they're going to feel that sense of confidence from you. So the more prep you've done, the better that's going to show. It's definitely a skill that you've got to work on. And nerves are expected, but there's nobody that knows your story better than you. And so I love when we get to work with clients and all of a sudden they're like in their notes, just reading nonstop. And I'm like, stop it, put your notes away. You know your own story. What are you doing? And then they kind of went, oh yeah, I do know my own story. I should talk about this with pride and put my shoulders back and get going. So, okay. So we've got past the unique value prop. We're into the questions. Talk a little bit about quantifiables and where you ought to put them and how often and that sort of thing. Because I know quantifiables are the proof, right?
Yes. So you want to set yourself up so that you have at least 5 to 7 stories, right? So maybe one was but don't have stories from 20 years ago either, right? want to have stories somewhat in the last 5 years or so. So something maybe for a board that you were on or a group outside, maybe something related to the PTA or something along those lines. You can use stories with that come from your non-professional work. You don't want only non-professional stories. You don't want only professional stories. You want to mix it up as much as possible. But you don't want to talk about your divorce or birthing your children or anything like that. So you want to get personal, but not that personal, right? And again, this seems like it's common sense, but people make these mistakes all the time because they get so carried into the situation that they want to share these things, and they kind of forget that, okay, this is the first impression that I'm making, and this is probably not something that's appropriate for an interview, right? So one is to really make sure that you've got your stories down. And let's say there's a story around a team that you had to lead and you were bringing in a new product into the market, or yes, let's talk about a new product in the market, right? So maybe there was a conflict there. So maybe you can use that as your conflict story. But what happens if you've already used that as your leadership story, which is why you need to have at least 5 to 7 stories ready and in your back pocket to go, because you're going to be asked questions and you're going to need to think on your feet a lot. And if you've already used one example, you can't use it again. You don't want to use it again.
And I love that you said have stories ready. First of all, a story is going to be way more compelling than saying I was 200% of plan and then I was 225% of plan. Okay, great. Nobody remembers that. They just remember you did it. Bravo. If you can tell a story of how you got there, of how you got the biggest deal in the history of the company, or the biggest deal with that client ever, or you got more, your adoption rate was higher than, ever in history. Those moments are memorable, but the story that goes with it is what's going to make them be able to retell it to someone else. So you want to be really thoughtful about those stories, and the more human and the more interesting, the better.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about it, if they're, in the old days, they would sit around a table. So now they get on a Zoom call, but they say, I really like that candidate. Now, if they've gone through 10 candidates in the last 2 days, they're not necessarily going to remember everybody's name. They told me this great story about scuba diving. Like, for me, I'm an advanced scuba diver. So if I'm in an interview, I will figure out a way to make sure that they know that. I will figure out a way to make sure that they know that I'm multilingual, even if that's not on the job application.
Yeah.
That being said, what you said earlier is also really important, not just for the resume, but for the interview side of things. So go back to the job description and read it and say, these are the skills that they're looking for. What are the stories that I have that are going to demonstrate that I have these skills? And those are the stories that you want to tell. That'll really help you codify what you want your big picture impression to look like. You want to show them all different sides of you. So by answering different questions with different stories that are not related to each other, they really get a good sense of whether or not they want to work with you. And that's the other big thing. 60% of the interview is this a good fit?
Yeah,
And
they like me. Yeah.
They like me, right? And so there was this thing called the airport test. Do you know about this?
Mm-mm.
So the airport test is, let's say we are going to a meeting in Cleveland, me and you, and we get stuck because there's snow, and we're at the airport for 8 hours. Is this somebody that you would want to sit at the airport with for 8 hours?
That's right.
There are certain people that's going to happen at some point in some way. It may not be at the airport. It may be because you're stuck in a conference room trying to get some work done for a project that's
100%.
The next day or something like that. But the reality is this somebody that I want to work with? Is this somebody that I would go to get a glass of wine with or coffee with or whomever? So you want to show your authentic self.
100%.
If you're not telling these stories and you're not showing your authentic self and you're not showing your enthusiasm and you're completely stoic and you're looking down and you're just not paying a lot of attention, that's not what they want to make sure. Whatever the role is, they're going to want to make sure that you are going to get with other people who are working at the organization, right?
You said something that tickled my brain, and I wanted to share this too. A lot of companies have social media presence now, and if your senior officers have been interviewed on podcasts or in the news or in a news article, do your homework first, read that stuff, watch that stuff, and be able to talk about it. I know the CEO of T-Mobile, he is on LinkedIn every day posting really great stuff. And if I'm going to go interview at T-Mobile, I better read that stuff. And then I can talk about it. And I can say, you know, what I love about your CEO is his passion around taking care of his customers and taking care of his employees equally. I love when he talks about blah, blah, blah. First of all, it shows that you're interested in the company. And you're probably putting them first, at least in the interviewer's mind. So take some time and do that homework. There's so much content available now. If you're not following all of the senior officers on LinkedIn, you should. It's a really good practice, and you'll see what they're posting. Even if you're not going to interview, if it's the CMO posting something and you're interviewing in finance, it doesn't matter. You're talking about a senior officer at the company, and you're doing your homework in a different way.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
Cool. Okay, so you get through the interview. Let's say you do everything right and they're like, okay, we'd like to start negotiating. What do you do? Well, first, hold on. Let's back up. Let's say they ask you the question of death, which is, how much money do you want to make? How do you answer it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Before we jump into that, I just wanted to add a couple of things that I think
are
really important for people who are interviewing. They ask their questions and then you have a chance to ask yours. Never say, I don't have any questions. I don't think anybody's going to do that, but I always feel the need to say that. Never say for you. I think I have everything I need. No, you have specific questions for specific people that you've researched on LinkedIn. And you want to ask, you don't want to ask the CEO what the process is going to look like going forward. They're not thinking about that. They're not thinking about, well, the next 3 days, we're going to be finishing this. And then the hiring manager, that's the question for the hiring manager. You don't ask the hiring manager details about the product because they're not going to know it. So know your audience first, right? Super important. And then the second thing is ask questions that are insightful beyond, like I said, beyond what you find on Google. I love what you just said. If you YouTube them, you find out the CEO has talked about something that's really important, that is futuristic for the company. Talk about how that has impacted this person's role. Ask questions around that, how will that impact this role that you're interviewing for, right? So there's so many questions you can ask. My favorite question is, and I think it's a ballsy question, and I think it's a really good one, is what can I do to make your life easier? If this is your boss that you're interviewing with, right? Or the CEO that you're interviewing with, or someone high up, not the hiring manager. There's nothing you can do that's going to make their lives easier. So what can I do that's going to help you succeed in your role? The other one that I think is even more important is if this is a role you really want, Lyndsay, I'm so excited about this role. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 reasons as to why I'm so excited about this role. So say that, and then say, is there anything about my candidacy that gives you pause? Because I'm very excited about this position and I can really see myself here, or something along those lines. Asking them, is there anything about my candidacy that gives you pause, really shows them that you are interested. And it's a really strong way to end the interview, because sometimes interviews endings can be really awkward, right?
Yeah.
It's not a normal conversation to go into somebody and say, hey, here's why you should hire me, and here's why I'm the best, and here are all my strengths, and there's nothing wrong with me, and I'm just perfect, and you'd be lucky to have me. It's a 2-way conversation. They'd be lucky to have you, you'd be lucky to have them, right? But you have to be mindful about who you're talking to and what they want to hear from you also.
Well, and be careful when you ask that question. Your tone is really important, because I've had people that do this very pompous kind of, so is there any reason you wouldn't hire me? Which nobody wants to be put on the spot that way. Nobody wants to answer that question. And immediately you go into the no pile because you ruffled feathers. You made them feel unsettled. You want to say it with earnest, feelings, with sincerity, I'm really excited about this position. Is there anything that would give you pause about my candidacy? Like, that is heartfelt, it's authentic, it's not pompous. So just be careful how you ask that. I think it's a great question. You just have to watch it, because I've certainly heard it. I'm on the interviewing as a hiring manager. I've heard it and I didn't like how it was delivered.
Yeah, you have to be really careful, but you also have to be ready to answer the question. So if they say, this is what we're worried about, you've got to be really quick to answer how
Okay.
you will be able to manage that very easily. And the beauty of it is, if you don't know the answer, then you could say, that's a really good question. Something, try and give as full of an answer as you can, but then when you write your thank you or whatever, you can go into it in more detail. But this really gives them an opportunity also to realize that you're just really serious about this position.
Mhm. All right. So you got through the interview, you made it to the next round of negotiating, and they say, how much money do you want to make? What do you do?
So yeah, great. I love that question too. So first of all, you don't want to be the one to put out a number. Really try hard to not have to do that. Sometimes when you write in the application and you do it online, they make you put in a number. Go on Glassdoor, salaries.com. If you know somebody who works there, get a general sense and add a number there.
Well, and many states have to disclose a pay range now. I know Massachusetts does. That just went into effect yesterday.
Yeah, I
So,
think as well. So, or it's getting close to that. So,
mhm.
yeah, absolutely. So you want to make sure you do your research in advance and know this. And by the way, salaries.com and glassdoor.com are also good places to go if you want to learn what interviews are like at these places. So that's another resource for you. But I'm really excited about this position, and I want to make sure that this is a great fit for both of us. And I'm open to understanding what the fair market value of this role is, and I'd love to continue our conversation. Something along the lines, not committing, no range. If they push, it's basically the message that you want to give them is, I'm going to make this decision based on more than my salary. I usually say, I'm looking at the full package, and I'd love to learn more about the full package or something along those lines. So that's definitely what I would say, but trying really hard not to give a number.
Yeah, I agree. You'll put yourself in the corner, because if you say, I want to make $185,000 and they were prepared to do 215, you just lost a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
So it's always better to say, actually, I'd really love you to share the range that you're considering for this role, and I'll tell you if I'm a fit.
Yeah, right. And I think sometimes they will say it just to make sure that you're aligned because they don't want to waste their time.
That's right.
But sometimes they won't. And if they keep pushing, look at the range that they provide and go at the upper part of that.
Yeah.
That's what I would recommend. The other thing is, it really is negotiable, right? And if you don't negotiate, or if you lowball yourself, if somebody really lowballed themselves to me in an interview, I'd be like, man, this person doesn't know their worth. This
Yep.
person hasn't done their homework.
That's right.
Right. So this is not a good fit for our company. We need people who are going to be very resourceful, very intuitive, do the work, do the research, all the things. So, and self-advocate. They expect you to negotiate.
And let's remember that it's a package, right? It's your salary and your commission, that's a part of it, or your bonus. But there's also, do you have unlimited time off? Do you have, all of your benefits taken care of? Do you have a 401k? Like, there's a lot of pieces to that overall package. And if they're not willing to give on more money, perhaps they're willing to give on stock. Perhaps they're willing to, do a signing bonus. There's a lot of things that can be played with. And you have to remember that you've got all of those pieces to be able to negotiate with. So don't feel like, if you're close, if you're, within 5K of where you want to be, there are other pieces that you can add to that pile that is going to make that gap feel a little bit smaller.
If you think about it, when you are applying for jobs, you are in a position where you're in control of what your resume looks like. So you have that control, but they have the power. They're going to decide whether they're going to move you forward. When you're interviewing, the power is kind of, it seems like they have all the power, but really you do too. And you have to remember it's a two-way street, it's a two-way conversation, that it has to be a fit for both of you. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. Let's say it is a fit and they come to you with an offer. Here, you have the power. This is where you have the power. You don't have the power to say, hey, it's a $200,000 offer and I want $600,000. That's not the power that you want, right? Or that you have. But you have the power because it's expensive to go through all of these processes, have all the senior leaders meet with you, all of those things, onboarding, all of that takes time, money, energy, all of it. So they want you at this point. So keep that in mind. That being said, like I said, you can't be unrealistic either. And the last thing you want to do is over commit and under deliver. That will really damage your career and your reputation at the firm.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's so important to understand, like Raina said, do your homework, understand what the range is for those kinds of jobs, and go in with really open eyes, knowing that there's things that you can play with. You are not in a corner. So, okay, so you get to the finish line of the interview. You think it goes really well. What's the first thing you need to do post interview?
Yeah, within 24 hours, you must send a thank you, and not a generic, I really enjoyed meeting with you and I look forward to learning about next steps. It's, dear so and so, I really, you can thank them for meeting with you, and then I really enjoyed talking about X. Or after the interview, I thought about what we talked about, and here's a resource that I came across, and I thought I would share it with you. That is very much aligned with what you were talking about, or something along those lines, right? Anything that's personable. And if you'd have 7 interviews with 7 different people in one day, that's 7 different unique thank yous, because they may share them, and then it'll make you look even better. And oftentimes they do share them. So,
Well, and to that point, I know from an interviewing perspective, sometimes you're a little nervous and it feels like a blur and you don't even remember what you talked about. So a really good practice is go get in your car or go to a quiet place and write some notes about what you talked about, or write it in your book. And that way you're not going to lose it when you go on to the next interview and you're still, you're like, oh my God, it was a blur. I don't even know what we talked about. I can't remember. At least you have some of those bullets. So capture it. It's good for your brain. It's like if you wake up and you don't write down your dream, it's gone forever. So write down in some way, shape, or form what transpired in that conversation, because that will help you with your thank you notes.
yeah, absolutely. So now, in the old days, I would have always said write written thank yous as well.
Yeah.
The struggle now is that because of hybrid and remote work, you obviously cannot ask for people's personal addresses. That would be completely inappropriate. So I think now the shift, I would say, is more towards the thank you. And if you interview with that person again for the next round, for whatever reason, maybe they were part of a panel, but now they're, just one-on-one or whatever it is, again, that thank you has to look very different. So now you've done the thank yous, and then you wait, depending on what the hiring manager has said. If you go past the date that the hiring manager says, you can reach out and say, just wanted an update on my candidacy, really excited, just reiterate your excitement for the position, and ask. Now, if you don't hear for 3 days, that's not the time to ask them either, right? You don't want to sound like you're too eager or impatient either. So you have to play that game a little bit.
You do. And if somebody walked your resume in, or it was that warm connection, reach out to them immediately afterwards. Hey, I just finished the interview. If you hear anything, let me know. And ideally they will. But if they don't give you a response, immediately check back with your friend and say, hey, I heard, it's been 3 days. Did they give you any feedback, or what do you think I should do? The waiting is the hard part, and you have to kill a lot of flies with a SWAT. So you really want to do as many interviews as you can. Set yourself up for a really busy calendar, and you're going to kiss a lot of frogs. So just use those interviews as practice. It's really good for you. As much as it's painful to go through and the fear of rejection, the process of telling your story and the process of explaining your value is something that you will benefit from in your life. It's going to go long past the interview.
And the good news is the higher up you go, the more conversational it gets. So they really want to have someone who has the values and the skills that they're really looking for in that role. So if you match that, then, and you don't have to match all of them, by the way. This is the one thing that women also do very often, is they apply for roles that they have a 60 to 80, maybe 100% match.
Yeah.
40%, just apply for it. Write in your cover letter why you're a really good fit. Use that internal resource. And some people hire only for skills. You don't know what they're going to hire for. Some people hire because they just want to work with really good people. So you've got to put both of those things forward.
Well, and you said it before, it's a two-way street. You are interviewing them too. You want to make sure it's the right culture fit. So asking questions like, could I speak to a few people on the team? First of all, if they say no, that's a red flag. Run. If they say, yeah, sure, let me give you a couple people's numbers, I'm going to have them reach out to you. Great. Ask them, how does your boss manage when times are tough? What's their disposition? Because if they're a yeller, or if they're, somebody who likes to micromanage, that is probably not going to be what you want. And you want to make sure you understand that and you go in with really open eyes. So asking questions like, what's the culture like here? How do you guys handle if something goes wrong, if we miss a number? Like, what's the tone, what's the disposition, what do the leaders do, both in good times and in bad? And I think those questions are absolutely yours for asking. If they ask you at the end, do you have any questions? There's an easy one. What's the culture like here? How do people enjoy the company? What do they talk about? What opportunities are there for me to network within the company? Are there groups that I can join? Business resource groups. Is there a women's network? Is there a people of color network? What is out there that I can be involved in? And when you do that, first of all, it makes it look like you're an employee who's interested in more than just the job. You want to be a part of the culture, a part of the fabric. And that, I think, is a good look.
So one thing that I would add to that is, if there are ERGs, I would start the question with, I saw that the BIPOC ERG is really active and I'd love to learn more. So the difference between asking what's the culture like versus, hey, I've researched, so I'm showing you that I've researched this, right? And so now I know what the next, I want to step beyond that already. Or yeah, I think that's the culture question.
You can't always find that stuff, though. It's not always on a website. You wouldn't always know it. So your research won't necessarily show you that those things exist. So if you don't know, ask. And if you do know, then say, hey, I want to be involved more, or I love doing, XYZ work. I've done that before. I was an LGBTQ ally. Do you have anything like that here? I think those are really great questions to ask that kind of infuse you into the fabric of the company. And if they say no, maybe that should give you pause. If that's important to you, you want to be thinking about that. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left. What parting advice would you give to our audience for anybody that is about to go through an interview?
Yeah. First, remember it's a two-way street. I know sometimes it's really hard to remember that. Be yourself also. The authenticity. This is not a fake it till you make it moment. They will see right through that. They interview people all the time. And you want to show them who you really are so that they can also make an informed decision. I would say make sure that you do all the research that you can on the company, on the individuals that you're meeting with. If there is something that you have in common with them, don't get too creepy about it, but it's great to say, oh, I noticed on LinkedIn that, you went to X school. I graduated from there as well. I really enjoyed such and such club or whatever it is, right? Just showing that demonstrate that you've done the research, essentially.
Show me you know me.
Yeah, there you go. Show me you know. And ultimately, sometimes we think that, oh, I really want this position, and then it doesn't work out. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I wish I could say it will, but sometimes you have to have 20, 30 interviews before you're able to really land the position that's right. And that's okay too.
Well, and I think you also, sometimes it's a gift. If you think you're supposed to have this job and you don't get the job, it's the universe's way of protecting you and saying there's something better, there's something different, and just wait. It's out there. But take every interview as a learning experience, an opportunity for growth, a way to hone and sharpen your skills. And if you come at it from that perspective, where it's always going to be making you better, then every interview counts for you. And that's really important to remember.
Yeah, and also they're not there. You don't know the reason that somebody else got it and you didn't. It could be they could be more qualified. It could be they could be less qualified, but they are fluent in a language that they are really looking to expand their market in, or something along those lines. So being hard on yourself because you didn't get the job without the information is counterproductive, because you have to keep going. You have to keep trying. You have to keep putting yourself out there.
Well, Raina, thank you for being a great guest today. Thank you for all of the tips and the tools that you offered and shared. I hope the audience found it really valuable. And you are going to be part of our Career Accelerator coming up later this month. If you want more information about that, reach out to either of us. Make sure we're connected, and we're happy to share our links with you on getting enrolled in the 2-day career intensive. So thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Happy New Year. And I will see you soon, girlfriend.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.